Peterson Pipe Notes presents Charles Peterson, the original thinking man. A brief look at the life of the original thinking man, an artisan pipe maker whose pipe smoking led him to invent the world's most famous patent pipe and co-found Peterson of Dublin, the world's oldest continuously operating briar pipe company. Among the earliest known pipe smokers was a guy who, apart from looking like Chuck Stanion on a wild day, went by the moniker of Plato. And it was probably while defending his own pipe smoking, maybe from his girlfriend, but certainly from the Philistines on Capitol Hill, that he said something many pipe smokers have since embraced. The unexamined life is not worth living. I'd like to take you on a journey through the life of Charles Peterson, the original thinking man behind the company's famous icon, as well as a gifted artisan and inventor who co-founded the world's oldest continuously operating briar pipe company. I'll begin with his work as an artisan, look at some of his inventions, including a look at his second patent pipe, the Nap, recreated in the summer of 2019 by the team of Silver Gray and Brad Pullman, and then wrap up with a look at what it is that keeps pipe smokers coming back to Peterson for 128 years. I think it might be fun if we place Charles Peterson's journey in the context of our own. And if the hundreds of testimonies Brian Levine has recorded on Pipes Radio magazine are to be believed, very few of us begin our pilgrimage with a pipe made by Bo Nord or Brad Pullman. We started down this path with a basket pipe and a pouch of Captain Black or their equivalents, eventually adding 1 or 101 production pipes to the rotation, then often scrimped and saved and sold up in pursuit of artisan pipes from the finest carvers in the world, defining and refining our collections as whim and finance permit. So let's begin where many of our interests are, with artisan pipes, but not artisan pipes from 2019, but 1885. Here's Charles Peterson at 33 years old. He's been working at Frederick Kapp's Brick and Mortar in Dublin for 10 years. Carving meerschaum and briar, shaping amber, turning and engraving precious metal, and repairing customers' pipes, essentially doing the kind of work that Frederick Kapp's brother George Kapp was still doing in London at the time and had done in partnership with Frederick until the brothers went their separate ways. As you can almost see in this detail, Charles was no slouch as an artisan in briar. Here's more of his work, this time in meerschaum, from a Thomas Mason glass plate photograph taken in 1905. Look at the detail of the enormous figural meerschaum in front of Peterson, to the right of the frame. By the way, that's nephew-in-law Alfred Kapp behind him. And let's not forget he was the designer not only of original patent shapes from the 1896 catalog, but the expanded range of shapes found in the catalog a decade later. It is almost certainly the case that every meerschaum made in the Kapp brothers era was the work of Charles Peterson, as there was no other pipe carver on the premises until Jimmy Malone was hired in 1891. What you're looking at here is a straight-sided mirror with amber stem from 1883. And a mirror and amber bulldog with engraved rose gold wind cap and band from 1885. And here's a two-piece meerschaum cheroot holder, a striking figural likeness of Queen Victoria from 1896. In later life, Peterson found it necessary to travel increasingly on business to St. Claude to buy briar or to the Netherlands, the UK, Prague, and France to work with distributors. But Peterson's favorite place was still in the shop with a pipe in his mouth, carving briar or meerschaum and bending amber or cutting vulcanite, practicing his original craft, as this clipping from 1910 attests. A number of non-production or artisan briars also survive. This 1896 patent system is certainly his work. This patent system from 1900, a massive engraved gold mount with amber P-lip, is from the collection of Racine and Laramie in Old Town San Diego, and it is also undoubtedly his work. And this lovely figural lady in briar from 1906 may even have been a representation of his wife, Annie. This patent system figural bulldog mirror, my co-author Gary Malmberg's personal favorite of the early pipes, may also have been Charles Peterson's work. And this wonderful tomato with its red amber from 1916, if by him, is among the last pipes he carved before his death in 1919. What distinguishes Charles Peterson's patent-era design language is as much about invention and innovation as it is artisanry. As a dedicated pipe smoker, and he was often photographed with one in his mouth, Charles Peterson was also the product of his era, which, as incredible as it seems to us from this distance, was in fact the first age of the briar. He landed in Dublin from Latvia in 1875 or 1876, which is also the year sometimes assigned to the emergence of the briar pipe. By 1891, Charles had 16 years' experience in the business and had married Sarah Capp, the English widow of his deceased employer's brother, a woman who, I would like to underscore, was de facto the first Capp in what would become Capp and Peterson, and who held until her death the literal purse strings to the fledgling business. It might help to situate yourself if you draw an analogy between the interest in artisan pipes of our day with the fascination with patent pipes in Peterson's own. Patent pipes were everywhere. In fact, it may have been Frederick Capp's early interest in the Cottam patent pipe that catalyzed Charles Peterson's own interest in how the briar pipe could be improved. Then as now, there were pipe smokers who weren't impressed with patent pipes, as this brilliant aphorism from 1896 attests. Nevertheless, as this postcard postmarked February 12, 1912 suggests, just 14 years after Charles Peterson's final patent, people as removed as those in the tiny town of Popple, Minnesota, knew about the pipes Peterson was making. The fact of the matter was, quite simply, as co-author Gary Malmberg asserts in our book, Charles Peterson's invention actually worked, so that 128 years later, there are smokers who are interested in Peterson pipes in 159 of the 195 countries currently recognized by the United Nations. To judge from the dozens of patent pipes in Peterson's era, early briar pipe smokers dealt with the same 6 basic problems we encounter, problems Charles Peterson set out to address: wet smokes, hot smokes, tongue bite, moisture in the chamber, debris in the air hole, and uncomfortable mouthpieces. We don't know when Charles Peterson began to work on his system, but the first iteration appeared in his 1890 patent. His first concern was with creating a drier smoke, one that didn't require the use of a pipe cleaner at intervals during the smoke. This was achieved by the reservoir and the unusual tin and mortise configuration, whereby smoke must descend from the chamber air hole before it ascends to the button, dropping moisture into the well. This had the added attraction, as Shane Ireland recently pointed out in a Smoking Pipes video, of preventing debris from moving up through the air hole. In 1894, Peterson added a second crucial patent concerned with 3 things: cooling the smoke, avoiding tip of the tongue burn, and creating a fuller flavor profile across the entire palate. He achieved this by drilling a graduated bore that typically moves from 1.5 millimeter at the button to 5 millimeters at the tenon end, and then turning the button up toward the palate and away from the tip of the tongue. Then, in 1898, Charles Peterson completed the P-lip system as we know it by adding the unusual button. This button, so misunderstood and often maligned by contemporary pipe smokers, was meant to create a comfortable clenching experience. Since many pipe smokers today seldom think of clenching their expensive pipes, and many in Peterson's own day would rarely not clinch their pipes, it has, in the company's long-standing educational emphasis, disappeared, gradually becoming a thing of puzzlement to most smokers. The Peterson P-lip, as per the 1898 third and final patent, was designed by Charles Peterson with a prominent flat upper and lower shelf for the teeth and a tongue tuck, not only to give extra security, but to ensure the smoke travels over the tongue tip. It worked extremely well for all smokers who use a canine premolar combination to clinch, but it will not work for those who tuck the mouthpiece into the side of the cheek and use the premolar front molars, or for those who attempt to use it like a fishtail. Let me add parenthetically that sometimes a faulty stem bend can be the problem. That proved to be the case with the Hopkins seen here, which had a pronounced upward tilt to the button, a disturbing trend seen in stem bending from the factory in recent months. Aside from not looking like a first-issue Hopkins and disregarding 4 of the 5 historical Peterson bend styles, you'll find that your teeth simply cannot clutch it without discomfort. Interestingly enough, Charles Peterson didn't stop with the 1898 patent, but continued on with his experiments with airflow, moisture, perceived hotness, and flavor, registering his patents until 1914, just 5 years before his death. On the right is the last patent pipe he registered, which extends the 1898 concept with a type of cotton wad filter or absorption material. For us today, the most fascinating of the later patents has to do with what he called the Knapp mouthpiece, Knapp being horse race lingo, which can be loosely translated as a sure bet. It was patented in 1903, advertised in the 1906 catalog, and in production until at least the Irish Free State era. My co-author Gary Malmberg and I had known about the Knapp for a long time, seen photos of vintage amber versions in the collection of Mario Lubinsky, and handled one in the Peterson Museum. But it wasn't until Gary acquired an Irish Free State system with a vulcanite Knapp mouthpiece that we could find out how it really worked. He was so impressed that he sent it to me to smoke for myself, writing, "I found smoking this Knapp lip is not even remotely like smoking a P-lip, nor like smoking a fishtail. It is better than both." The Knapp button, which Silver Gray is aptly dubbed a clamshell, radiates smoke through 8 vents from 5 slots of 36 degrees separation. Smoke is felt first from the side ports, then radiates from the central ridges of the button, which extend above and below the lateral vent. Charles Peterson coupled this with the already existing system components of graduated bore in the stem and reservoir in the shank, evidently giving much thought to the way flavor might be distributed across the palate. It is an experience wholly unlike the P-lip. For me, the P-lip encourages long, slow draughts of smoke, while the Knapp is at the opposite extreme. It seems to want sips, the way one approaches the finest Irish whiskey or handcrafted bourbon, revealing a very full, very soft, very deep flavor. Suffice it to say, I was so impressed with my own trial that after a few smokes, I asked Silver Gray to make reproductions for a larger vetting group. If you're interested in how these smoke, you can read the transcript of the Knapp vetting group's roundtable discussion at the petersonpipenotes.org blog site, where you can also get information from Silver Gray about how to obtain your own reproduction. One thing should be clear from what you've seen so far. Charles Peterson can lay claim to being one of the great visionaries in the history of the pipe. I think his company deserves a place with the great production pipe companies, Dunhill, Barling, Sheraton, Camoys, and GBD. And I think he himself deserves a place alongside the great pipe artisans. He accomplished for his generation what Sixton and Larsy Varson, Jess Chonowich, Bo Nord, and others have for ours. But in a sense, his work is larger than either category because he was also an inventor and entrepreneur. The last thing I'd like to share with you has to do with the appeal of Peterson pipes over the years and across the globe, where it comes from and why. I confess at the outset that some of what I say is conjecture, but it is conjecture based on the study of artifacts Charles Peterson has left behind, as well as his own words and the words of those who knew him. Our first clue to his identity and the corporate personality of the company he co-founded is found on the Irish census for 1911, where he, his younger brother John, and cousin Conrad are all listed as free thinkers. This identification was quite rare in the census, where most identified themselves as Roman Catholics or Protestants. The known facts of Charles Peterson's life mitigate against applying this label literally in its philosophical antagonism to the deism of Christianity. Peterson, after all, married his long-standing Roman Catholic landlady's daughter, and their children were christened in the Roman Church. I suggest we see Charles Peterson's self-appellation as free thinker as an exigent third-way worldview between the polarities of Irish papists and Protestants. If we approach free thinker this way, we find an unambiguous expression of Charles' worldview in the first paragraph to the introduction of Captain Peterson's first catalog in 1896. The paragraph is, to my mind, Charles Peterson's vision statement for the company and bears reading. When we think how universally the pipe has affected modern thought in art, science, literature, politics, and even the pulpit, how it has given relief and solace to overworked brains, how it has contributed to the best wit of our time, how it has drawn men together everywhere in many a jovial smoke and added comfort to countless chimney corners, the importance of supplying as perfect a pipe as possible is at once recognized. He seems to have been the kind of man who was sensitive to the needs of people around him and, where possible, used his creativity to help both them and himself. His patent for a woman's detangling comb, which went into production and was sold in Europe, is an interesting case. His daughter Isolde preserved her mother Annie's comb, as you can see here by the anagram. During the first 2 decades of the 20th century, women almost universally wore their hair very long, but put it up for most occasions. Charles and Annie seem, from his letters to her and the photographs of them that have survived, to have been unusually close, and it wouldn't be surprising that he might turn his mind to how he might make her life at home a little easier. If you've enjoyed or heard of Peterson's annual Christmas pipes, you may be surprised to learn that the first release wasn't in 2009, but 114 years earlier, in 1895. One of the papers Charles Peterson regularly read was Reynolds News, a London Sunday whose subtitle was Government of the People, by the People, for the People. It expressed, according to one authority, a radical working-class approach. In 1898, Charles sent the editor this letter. Sir, being a reader for many years of the valuable Reynolds newspaper and seeing you take a deep interest in entertaining the poor, especially the deserving cause of entertaining the poor sandwich men, I shall be willing, on behalf of my company, Captain Peterson Limited, to forward 3 or 4 gross pipes. That would be 432 or 576, for distribution on Christmas Day to the sandwich board men. He and his nephew and business partner, Alfred Capp, kept up this practice for a number of years afterwards, and just before hostilities broke out in 1914, they placed this ad in the Irish Times. For Christmas that year, Captain Peterson sent 25,000 pipes to the Irish troops moving up to the front lines. Their business, as well as their sense of duty, seems to have expanded. We look in much greater detail and much greater depth at K&P's employment practices, their inclusive policies, their political and social involvement in the Peterson book. The employees, for example, sponsored a Christmas dinner and gift-giving to the poor at the Unitarian Church next to the factory for many years. But even from these few glimpses into K&P's social and political involvement, I hope you can see the generosity of spirit found in Charles Peterson and Alfred Capp and the family business they created. One of the most interesting ways his worldview expressed itself in business was by the creation of what Andrew Wyke has so aptly called aspirational tiers, which I think may explain much of the enduring popularity of the brand. It begins with gateway pipes like these early pipes, a grade 4 system, and a dummies or reject, lines which were never seen in the catalogs. Cap and Peterson weren't afraid of stamping their name on them, something perhaps out of the ordinary in the production pipe world, and maybe foolish, many would say. It moved up to the meat and potatoes of the standard system with its classic nickel-mark mounts of shamrock, foxhound, and round tower, and its molded mouthpiece. But above that there was the premier, adorned with hallmark sterling and a hand-cut mouthpiece with bone tenon extension. Then there was the top of the line, the deluxe, adding its space-fitting mouthpiece. Finally, in the stratosphere of Ebouchon production pipes, there occur the almost never-seen Supreme systems with their gold mounts, space-fitting mouthpieces, hand-cut mouthpieces, and perfect Ebouchon briar. But there is no difference, as Paddy Larrigan, Peterson's master carver, has always insisted, in the engineering of the reservoir, graduated bore, and P-lip button from one end of the aspirational scale to the other. Charles Peterson and partner Alfred Cap seem to delight equally in making their pipes accessible to nearly everyone in the social spectrum, and sometimes, as we have seen, even those who couldn't, and in making them as well as they possibly could, using all the skills and craftsmanship at their disposal. Properly understood and smoked, the system still delivers one of the finest pipe smoking experiences in the world, and the design language originating in Charles Peterson's original patent shapes continues to be felt in every part of the Peterson catalog. That these pipes are within the reach of almost any pipe smoker is another homage to the inclusivity of Charles Peterson's vision. In conclusion, Peterson seems to have been a man with a good sense of humor who loved his neighbors and his work. His actions, even at this remove, reveal a man with a deeply inclusive sensibility, an immigrant, outsider, and self-described free thinker who seemed to find joy in providing for the welfare of the people who work for him, regardless of their gender, religion, race, or even politics. His company was renowned for its good working conditions, fair pay, and equity. To the surprise of some, he chose to train Dubliners rather than hire skilled foreign craftsmen when he opened his factory. The company always employed women, who would make up just over 50% of the workforce between 1937 and 1970. Charles Peterson's quiet belief in the human rights issues of home rule would later bear fruit in his daughter Isolde's lifelong work for Amnesty International. The pipes, of course, speak for themselves, at least to those who can appreciate the deep particularity of their Irish virtues. They are the embodiment and product of the deep Gaelic understanding of initiative, industriousness, hospitality, trustworthiness, creativity, excellence, wit, and self-rule. Yet, like the Irish themselves, it's not too much to say that Peterson, at its finest, will always be countercultural and even recalcitrant in the world of pipes. They were countercultural when they first appeared as novelty pipes and continued to be so when only British pipes were in vogue. Many Americans, notorious for their high regard of the Irish, understood this and continue to do so. With the current rise of artisan pipes, Peterson pipes are again unfashionable in many quarters because they do not command fabulous prices, nor are they made by a single individual. They are instead the product of a small community of craftsmen and women who hold their skills in trust from those who came before them. This trust is a living memory, as you can see in this photograph from last June. Charles Peterson trained his first silversmith, Jimmy Malone, who trained Liam Larrigan, seen on the left. Liam, in turn, trained David Blake, and David trained Peterson's current silversmith, Jason Hinch. There are as many reasons to smoke a pipe as there are pipemen, but through the centuries, the literature of smoking always circles and eddies back to the comfort pipe smoking brings and the space it provides for thought. In the end, to say the thinking man smokes a Peterson pipe rather than the sophisticated man, the wealthy man, or the fashionable man speaks to something more than a 110-year-old advertising slogan for a tiny Irish company that has, against all odds, weathered gales spanning 3 centuries. It is a belief held by those who smoke it. I'm Mark Irwin, co-author of The Peterson Pipe, The Story of Cap and Peterson, published by Briar Books Press, and I gave this presentation in its original form at the 2019 West Coast Pipe Show in Las Vegas. Many thanks to Steve O'Neill and Marty Pulvers for their hospitality at the show. For more information about Peterson shapes, lines, and series, visit my blog at www.petersonpipenotes.org. And thanks for watching.